Okay, let's begin with what's your name?
So my name is Adam Azzalino. I'm a graduate student here at Eau Claire in the history department. And yeah,
Uh, so you live in Eau Claire. What's the date and time right now?
the date and time is let's see, can I even see? It's 12:02, and I think is the so it's May 13th of 2020.
So if you're comfortable telling us some of your demographic information, so age, gender, race, disability, that kind of stuff.
Okay, I'm 29. I am Caucasian, and I have cerebral palsy, which is
Um,
my disability.
okay. So what are some of the primary things you do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, right now I'm in the middle of writing my thesis in history, so um, mostly it's doing research for that, and so it's a lot of looking through documents, um, and that's pretty much my life right now. I'm also starting to write that, so it's a lot of sitting at a computer writing most days.
I feel that so much right now. um,
Yeah. I
Oop, I
think
lost my
I
camera
just lost
somewhere.
you on the camera there. Uh,
Uh, I guess while we wait for that, when you first learned about COVID, what were some of your thoughts about it?
um, I was kind of watching what was going on over in Italy and how bad it was, and I just kind of like had an ominous feeling, I guess, and it didn't seem like Eau Claire was really thinking about it at the time, so I was a little nervous about that. But like that was my initial reaction as I kind of saw what was happening in Europe first, and was because I mean they were having they're still having a bad time, uh, but I mean I was nervous because it seemed like it was spreading. So
Yeah.
um,
How have your thoughts
but and I
changed
just
since then?
so can you say that again?
How have your thoughts changed about COVID versus when you first learned about it?
Um, how have my thoughts changed about it? I have to think what I thought first. uh, I guess that just that it that yeah it became as kind of worthless as I thought it would be. So I mean I guess it kind of confirmed my anxieties in the beginning that this might be bad. So
And so you're a grad student, and you just passed your comps, which is awesome. Uh,
hmm
what was your experience? Because you were doing your comps right when the pandemic kind of like hit the Wisconsin school system and we started shutting down.
right. So the way they did it is completely unprecedented here in the graduate department. Because they made us all do it in our rooms at home on our own computers, and uh, uh, I mean, ideally they want you in a testing office so they can observe what you're doing. That's part of the surveillance of education, I guess, in those kind of exams. But they couldn't do that, so I guess they just had to trust everybody that they didn't look in the books or whatever, which is I'm unique. I remember so Dr. Mann wanted us to come in up until the stay-at-home order. So I mean that changed everything. So I mean the fact that I could just go to my own computer and do it, and they would just email it to us is kind of strange. And um, so yeah, it was just the fact that it was a whole different kind of process of doing it because they want you in uh, the They normally do it in the lab that's next to the history room. So
Mm.
so everybody had to figure out a new structure for that. And so yeah, I mean that was kind of the feeling of that. It was just not the way that it was supposed to be. So it felt a little eerie, but
Yeah.
um,
I guess
and plus
I guess we should
the
clarify
only
what comps
yeah,
are. They're comprehensive tests that graduate students
right.
have to take. I haven't done mine. It'll be a while before mine is done. But could you
Mhm.
explain what the normal comps process is?
Sure, sure. So comprehensive exams, they basically make you read about so 30 to 40 books, and each of those 10 is in different categories. And then they send you 2 essay questions that you're supposed to write. Kind of like a mini historiography of the book, and uh, 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 so using each of those 10 books in those different categories. The normal process would be that you would go in the testing room that's next to the history lounge, and um, you don't go in there, you don't get any. I mean, so once you're in there, you don't get any notes. You don't get any. Uh, uh, you don't get any notes. You don't get the books in with you. So I mean, it's all from memory because they're kind of just trying to make sure that you understand the literature that you're doing it. But because of COVID, they made us do it from home in our rooms, and they would just email us those the questions. But you get, I think you got, I think it was 4 hours to do each of, to do the 4 questions total that you would get. So you get an hour per question, really, and you're just writing an essay. That's kind of basically like so a literature review of each of those so 10 books that are in every category that you choose. So mine were so public history. I did one on surveillance. I did one on the history of so World War I, and then I did one on the progressive era. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it was supposed to be, hopefully. So
No, that's really
if you need me to
helpful.
clarify anything, let me know. I still
But it's helpful to know, not only just for like other people generally trying to like understand what it is, the graduate process and whatnot, but also for me personally, because I'm gonna have to do that soon.
yeah, it comes for everyone. So,
Yeah.
but as long as you read the books, you should be able to do what you need to do. If you don't read the books, you're gonna probably struggle a little bit. So that's
Yeah. And
uh,
so versus doing it in the testing center and having to do it, at home, do you think it was easier or harder because you're not in that like controlled environment?
um. Well, the process itself of actually taking the test and trying to come up with like so trying to answer the questions from memory itself is agonizing, and it would have been agonizing no matter so where I was. But I mean, I definitely felt more comfortable doing it from home just because you got to be in your own space, and I could get up almost so whenever I wanted, and I didn't have to commute, so that was nice, I guess. Um uh but I mean, they don't have the so what we call in surveillance a panoptic structure, which you'll have to read Michel Foucault at some point, which is basically you don't know who's observing you, and that's kind of Linda's job during the comp process, is to make sure that you're not doing anything you're supposed to. So that kind of those kind of like educational structures are kind of gone. So And it so I mean, so not having that there was, I guess, one less level of anxiety, I guess, and it just felt nice that it just felt nice that I didn't have to walk across the footbridge at like 7 in the morning, and probably wake up at 6:30. I could almost roll out of bed at like 7 and just go take the test and be done. So it was nice. Um, uh, but yeah, I but you don't feel any less rush for time, and the anxiety of actually doing the questions didn't change at all. I imagine I probably would have been just as more about the same level of stress about the actual content. So
Yeah.
uh,
So do you think that the doing it at home doesn't really change, because there's still the stress of it, so it doesn't change, like, I guess, the grade, not the grading, but like how well students do on the comps?
well, I haven't taken it in like in the actual room,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there are multiple people in the room when you do it in that. Like there are a couple of people taking comps at the same time. You are, and I easily get distracted. So like I might be thinking about, oh, what's so Levi doing over there, instead of me just focusing on what I'm doing. So I'm kind of glad it was just me. I think the original plan for me though was they were gonna do it at I think they were gonna take me over to the disabled services room, because they have some private testing rooms, and they were like up until they made the decision that people could just do it from home. I think they had so one person working in the office, because they kind of stripped down to essential staff at that time. So like up until they made the decision that people would do it via email, I was supposed to go in, and that kind of made me anxious, just because I'm pretty healthy, but I'm also in a demographic that is at risk. So it just kind of made me nervous about, oh man, I would have to go out in public and go to the building and stuff, and there was anxiety with that. So I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did. That took off the psychological stress of just having to go onto campus and stuff. So hopefully that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. It's kind of like a weird, bizarre scenario that, ironically, this pandemic, which is really scary and whatnot, might have actually been beneficial for you to get your comps done and be focused and not feel as stressed, versus doing it, being watched
Yeah.
and being timed. And, well, I mean, you were still timed, but so you talked about being at a higher risk for if you were to contract COVID. What are your like specific thoughts and concerns, if you were to by chance contract it?
Uh, um, what are my thoughts if I were to contract it? Well, I am out of network right now with my insurance and everything. I think the treatment or whatever is supposed to be free or whatever, but uh, just the fact until I move home next week, I mean, nobody else knows me here in the building. So if I were to catch something, I don't even know who I'd call. I'd probably dial 911 or whatever, and like, but then you're just kind of hoping somebody comes. So I mean, there's some anxiety there, just the fact that I don't really know anybody in the building and everybody's gone, and stuff that would happen. Would I even be able to let somebody know is kind of the concern there, I guess. Um, but I have some anxiety problems to begin with, so this is not helping.
Yeah. So
But
yeah, that's probably going to be really scary then.
yeah. And but yeah, I just try not to think about it as much as I can.
Yeah.
I do check in with the news, but not a whole lot anymore, because it just makes it seem worse. But So yeah, I guess those are kind of my initial thoughts about if I were to catch it. But
And when you were looking at the news, what were the sites, or I guess news broadcasting that you were looking at?
um, I tend to look at let's see, I'm forgetting everything that I know that I um so mostly PBS or Democracy Now, or programs like that, or The Intercept, which is a newspaper. Um, they have some pretty good coverage about what's happening around the world, so you kind of get a wider sense of things. But the problem with that is, too, it's all about New York, so you're kind of getting the worst stuff out of it, too. So, I mean, you're kind of getting a sense of like the worst place. So that kind of, I suppose, ratcheted up my anxiety a little bit too, because you're getting, I mean, Eau Claire has cases, and now that they're doing testing, they're increasing, but I don't think it's anywhere near as so troublesome, at least. Because I mean, Wisconsin, there's just not that many people that I can go through. So
Yeah.
but
How have you been able to keep up with what's going on
other,
in the Eau Claire area?
I just mainly Google, and I see what uh I mainly see what I can't think of the name of the newspaper here. I think it's the Leader, right, or the Telegram or something. But that one, and then I just kind of uh, and then a lot of it is through observation of uh, I guess just seeing what people are doing. So when I go for walks and things like that, and I kind of see, like, are people wearing masks, or like how are they,
Mm-hmm.
um, like acting when I go outside. I mean, those are kind of my two sources there, I guess.
Yeah. And how do you think that's gonna, with this pandemic, it's kind of unknown what's gonna happen in these next couple of months. How do you think that's gonna affect the school, like UWEC? Like, are they, I know one of the California colleges has already declared that they're going online for the fall semester. Do you think that's gonna happen at UWEC?
Yeah, um, I'm hoping they would follow that lead. So my sister lives in Boston. She's actually a PA at a hospital in Boston. She works in the cardiology department there, and so she's not near the COVID stuff, but she pays attention to it because she has like some friends that are doing that right now. And she said that I think the Boston State University, or I mean, the state universities in some Massachusetts are already doing that. So I'm just assuming that that's something that's going to happen, probably with the UW system too. Um, but it doesn't affect me very much because I'm doing my coursework. So um, so I'm just writing my thesis, so it really doesn't like impact my life going online that much. The only thing is that have I don't have some face-to-face meetings with my advisors and professors. That's kind of the only change there for me. So,
How have you been able to get in touch with your advisors? Have like constructive feedback on your thesis as you're working on it?
yeah. So mostly it's through phone calls and um, or Skype or things like that, and I have some trouble talking on the phone just because I always seem to get a stutter when I'm on the phone. I think it's so that's part of my disability, is that I do have a nervous stutter sometimes. I think it's more when I can't see people, I get more nervous, so it's
Mhm.
harder to talk or something. And so the phone is not always a great way for me to communicate, but I manage. Because I have trouble holding the phone up to my ear, I have to use speakerphone, which that so that creates some issues. But I mean, but I've been able to get feedback when it comes, and for me, it's kind of like it feels like I'm transitioning into the next step a little bit early or
Yeah.
than normal, and that's really all that's happening because my plan was to move home back to Cedarburg, Wisconsin, where I live. At the end of May because my lease was up anyway. So it just kind of feels like I'm being pushed out a little bit, like a little bit earlier. So like that's kind of I mean, other than the fact that there is a global pandemic in the background and I can't go to restaurants when I go home, it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything that radically different right now than I would be, I guess. So
Yeah, because especially when the thesis, a lot of it's just like sitting down and reading and writing. You don't really interact with people that much, anyways.
right.
So probably not that too much different.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that meme that's about grad school and it's a guy like holding a pen and I'm gonna just kind of like I think it says grad school and then it I like it's the same picture for both so pre and post pandemic. That's kind of what it feels like, that you're doing exactly the same thing as a grad student, you know. So
Yeah, no, I feel that
there's some
as
truth to that one.
yeah. When we transitioned, I didn't realize, I guess, just how much of our stuff we've done online. Um, so doing work and whatnot,
Right.
it wasn't a huge shift. It was more of just like the shift in our environment more than anything. You talked about your sister working as a cardiologist in Boston. Do you know like what her experience has been, or like are you worried for her if she's in contact with people with corona?
Um, I worry that she downplays what's going on. Like, so let me put it that way. Like, uh, so when she talks about a lot of medical things, um, she tends to kind of disassociate from what's going on. She's not really telling me and my mom when she talks about it, like how bad things are or whatever. I think that's part of, so that's part to allay my mom's fears, I think. So I don't really know what she's going through because she's kind of cryptic about it. But I know that she did mention that they're still doing the kind of cardiac surgeries and things that they need to do in Boston, and I mean they all have to wear masks anyway to do those. So I don't think her particular department has changed that much, but I don't think she'd really let me know her own anxieties if she felt them either. So
Yeah. And I know Illinois has moved, I think, as a law that if you go out in public or you're like at stores and stuff, you have to wear a mask. I don't think Wisconsin has moved to that yet. I think it's specific locations where they make you, but I don't think it's a statewide thing yet.
right, I
Um,
think you might be right.
yeah. Do you know anyone that's gotten sick because of COVID-19?
Um, not sick, thankfully, but my friend who lives in so Plymouth, Wisconsin, they work at a Walmart, and I think they were feeling kind of symptomatic of COVID, and they had to go get a COVID test. That's I think it came back negative, thankfully, and they had to go back to work the next day. So like, you get this giant ball of fear, and then you have to go back to
Yeah.
sell people. And I know just from her experiences of kind of venting on social media, she's really aggravated that one, people aren't wearing masks when they go to Walmart, and two, that she has to go in to sell people Nintendo Switches and Animal Crossing, and like, she's really aggravated that people just don't download that stuff online, so they don't have to go out. But I think she works in the electronic department, so she probably sees more of like those unnecessary purchases too. So, but
Yeah, that's been a huge thing. Animal Crossing came out like right before everyone started doing lockdowns and whatnot, and so now everyone's stuck at home and they're playing on their Switches and whatnot, and that's been a huge thing for streaming sites and YouTube is
right,
people playing Animal Crossing. So I can totally understand that frustration though as a worker. Basically people get to go home and play on video games and whatnot while they're at work at risk, kind of thing. I'm surprised your friend was able to get a test so easily, because that's been a huge thing of the availability for testing.
yeah, I don't have any insight into how they got it or anything like that. I just kind of so passively see what they post on Facebook, but um, but but yeah, I know that that's kind of a problem, and I think you and the interesting thing for me studying surveillance right now is they're talking about uh they want to do some social tracing with phones and things like that. There are a bunch of telecommunication companies that are actually trying to trace people that have gotten COVID and kind of learn who they came into contact with. And like that's a big debate in kind of the I guess the surveillance studies community right now is that kind of an infringement on personal liberties, or is that for the collective good, or for the collective good? So,
Yeah, that could
so
definitely
I've
be
kind of
a
been
slippery
thinking about
slope.
that a little bit lately. Yeah, which I mean, you need that is kind of my opinion. I think uh, uh, I mean, you need that. I mean, that's how they discovered. I think that's how they discovered Typhoid Mary, was that they actually just kind of
Hmm.
uh, they went back and they talked to like all the people that she infected, and they realized that she was the commonality. Um, so social tracing is kind of a thing that is needed, but the concern is, so let's say that all these like all these telecommunication companies kind of create these relationships with state and local governments to surveil people. So what's put in place to make sure that it's only temporary, and that that those relationships and that infrastructure doesn't so stick around to be used for other stuff? I mean, that's kind of the danger, but
Yeah.
and but it's hard to be on the side of studying surveillance and actually root for people to be surveilled. So it's a
Yeah.
contradiction for me. So
That's a really interesting applying like what you're studying right now into what's going on right now. Um yeah, I would say that's a very slippery slope. Because it's like, people joke about the FBI agent that's watching me on my webcam kind of thing, but then to actually like be watching people and following where they're going
mhm.
and people that they're interacting with, that could be beneficial, if you're trying to figure out who's been infected. But again, like you said, what are the policies, what are the precautions to be put in so it doesn't continue and be abused in the future?
Because if you look at the history of kind of surveillance legislation and things like that, so when the Patriot Act was passed in like the early 2000s, there was some concern about it, but eventually it got accepted, and then it kept getting expanded. So there's kind of like this passive acceptance of these things that exist. You kind of see that with the things that Edward Snowden exposed to, is all that was kind of just moved back into the shadows, and we don't know what they're doing. And I think that that's why in the common culture there's always this joke about the FBI man who's spying on you, because they do have that capacity. So
Yeah.
there is a danger of that, and I don't know, it's a complex question, but I mean, so right now we need to trace people. I think my cousin's wife is actually part of that. I've only heard this anecdotally, but apparently she's part of the actual monitoring of people right now, and they got them in like this big I think it's like a lunchroom. I don't know where she's working exactly, but I know that they're all looking at people on uh, computers and just making sure that the people that are diagnosed are following the rules. And um uh, and I think too, the other question that I would so bring up is there's kind of this so the United States, you have a lot of individual so rights and liberties and things like that, but uh, so part of the reason that I think so South Korea and all so China and all these places where they've kind of that they've basically got it figured out now is because they have a strong central state that can say, okay, you guys, uh, we're basically going to do some martial law, so you can't go outside. There's actually going to be penalties. Uh, as we see with these protesters, we don't do that. So, so I mean, that's kind of one of the things too that's a contradiction for me, is actually think in this case a strong central authority that way is a good thing, and obviously are not getting that from our current administration. Um, it's interesting that we live in a time that the sitting president of the United States said, like, yeah, so why don't we just see if people drink bleach and see what happens? Like, that's something that's never happened before. So it's just interesting to see the contradictions of how different countries are handling this. And the part about things opening up in Wisconsin that makes me nervous is if you look at Germany right now, they tried that and they're seeing a spike in cases again. So, but that being said, I'm not an epidemiologist, so take everything that I say with a grain of salt here. But
Well, it sounds like you're not a huge fan of this current administration. And then there's been a lot of discourse on the actions or inactions of the federal government. What are some of your thoughts on, their policies, or like what's being said to the public?
um, yeah, I would say that I'm in opposition to the current administration in certain ways. I think that it's interesting that uh, so you're basically seeing a lot of the ideas from the Sanders campaign, which is kind of I would say close to what I identify as in terms of support. So you're basically seeing things like so testing will be free. I mean, that comes out of the call for for universal healthcare, and the fact that you are seeing these that everybody has these Trump checks too, kind of comes out of some of the policies that he's created too. But I mean, obviously, because the current administration is kind of like ideologically opposed to certain policies that he put forth. They're not going to do enough to actually support people. So I mean, that's kind of some of my thoughts is that we need to do more than what we're doing in terms of supporting working families and people. Because if you look at, Spain right now, they're basically doing like a universal basic income until the end of the pandemic, and I think that Canada basically gets about $2,000 a month until the end of this. So there are certain ideas that could be expanded upon that the current administration is not doing, and nor do they think are necessary. So I mean, that concerns me. But so yeah.
How do you think the state level, like Wisconsin, has have they done a good job kind of trying to curb the cases or get the aid people need?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're doing what they can. I think that if Scott Walker were still governor, you might see some more sympathy towards the economy and some businesses. So we might open up faster than we are. But I mean, of course, you have the people on the Republican side that are trying to sue Governor Evers to get the order rescinded, and I mean, so you do have all these different forces that are kind of at play. But I think he's doing what he can, and I'm glad that we have the governor that we do. If it was somebody else, I would be even more nervous. But so yeah, I guess, and I think he's doing what he can at the state level, I guess.
Yeah. Do you know how long the stay-at-home order is for Wisconsin? Because I know, in May we heard that they were extending it, or in April they were extending it into May. But I don't know if they are gonna call it off or if they're gonna extend it again.
I believe that it goes till so May 26th, which is, I don't know what they're going to do. I think that part of that is possibly security theater. By that I mean that they might extend it again, but if they keep giving people this tangible date, like May 26th, like you just got to make it 2 more weeks, so people are willing to accept that, right? Because they can see something tangible, but it might be more than that. I do know that so my plan was to go to Summerfest in Milwaukee and see Dave Matthews Band this summer, but that all got canceled. They are moving Summerfest itself to September, but the band itself decided to move its tour back a year, which is so I mean, so people are making those kind of decisions. I don't know. Like, I mean, obviously people are thinking that it might be more. Who knows? It all just depends on kind of who wins this the battle between the people who want to stay at home and the people that want to shop. I don't know how that's going to play out, but
in your opinion, do you think we should continue the stay-at-home order, or are you more for kind of like slowly letting people kind of out and opening up businesses?
I'm not a politician, but so I would hesitate to take anything that I say with any surreal value. But I think that it might be longer than people think. I'll just say that. I think that we should stay at home at least until we have some mass testing, which right now we don't. But because then you can just like every time you go out or whatever, you get a test. I don't know how that would work, but but I mean, that's how places like so South Korea have been able to kind of recover, is they're doing some of those things. So I mean, in a crisis like this, I think you need to adopt kind of what's working for other people. Um, but anyway, yeah, I know you kind of wanted to talk about how it's kind of affecting me as a disabled person a little bit more too, right? Is that kind of somewhere on
Yeah,
your agenda?
I guess what are any of your thoughts or experiences? You're living alone on campus, I believe, right?
Yeah, I'm on so Water Street in the student housing building, Aspen Mogensen. Um, and I guess the big noticeable change for me is uh yeah, like it's pretty much just me in here. I have a care worker that comes so once a week, and they do laundry and they pick up some groceries for me. The biggest challenge for me is so being able to find those groceries, because so normally I'd shop at so Woodman's, uh, but because of the stay-at-home order, there are no so like everybody is doing that. So all the pickup spots for like the pickup groceries are gone every week. So I've been having to go to Festival Foods, and there have been a couple. So right as this as the pandemic was starting, I had just trouble finding a store that I could send them to pick up my groceries, because everybody was so pilfering everything like toilet paper and things like that. Um, so for a while I had some anxiety of even trying to get food. There were a couple days that I had to order some burgers and freeze them just because I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to find groceries that week. And I don't like going to Festival Foods. I don't like supporting the giant big grocery stores like that. I'd rather do Woodman's because they're locally owned and stuff. So I mean, that's been a lifestyle change for me, and so having a care worker, um, that's also an anxiety, because like they go from different shifts and different uh, to people all the time, and you hope that they're practicing social distancing, but you don't know where they're going outside of your shift, where they do your laundry. So I mean, there's kind of a concern: is are they wearing a mask? Are they doing what they're supposed to do? So they don't so get you sick. So I mean, that's kind of been a worry too. Thankfully, the person I have now, I know that they're doing what they're supposed to do. But the person before that, I don't think they quite understood what was going on. So I mean, uh, so so that gave me a lot of anxiety. And if they were, if they were cleaning in this room, I'd be in the next room, and I'd make sure that I was away from them, just because of that. So that's kind of changed the whole dynamic that way. So
Yeah, I remember that totally the food shortage and people that were like buying in bulk and whatnot when this pandemic first started coming out because everyone was so scared of being stuck at home. I totally get that that was very difficult for you to find food. And I remember you posting on Facebook about the amount of like frozen dinners you were buying and people judging you about it, but it's like
yeah,
it's like that was accessible food for you. It's food that you can keep for a long time.
right,
It's not that many fast food dinners.
yeah. So I don't have any physical cooking skills. I can basically make an egg, and that's about it. Um, so I mean, I'm kind of stuck with frozen dinners and all this stuff with high sodium and whatever. Um, but I mean, yeah. So I mean, I'm just buying what I need for the week, which is about 21, and like yeah, people always comment that it's a lot, but that's probably my main source of food when I'm living alone. And so when I go back home, I'm going to start to try to cook a little bit more. But part of it is I've never had an ADA stove that I can roll under and do some cooking.
Mhm.
Um, so I've never really had the opportunity to try. So I mean, yeah, my goals for the year were completely different. So was everyone else's. But I was going to stop using those delivery apps and try to do cooking on my own and learn some skills. But that didn't happen because, um, and part of my coping mechanism of this pandemic is just ordering all the trash food you're not supposed to eat, like pizzas. uh, uh, yeah, I don't think anybody's going to have a summer body in June. So
No,
nobody needs to worry about that.
everyone was like, they get their New Year's resolutions, and I'm gonna be fit this year, and and then COVID hits, and it's like buying fast food is like the only way you can get out of the house, kind of thing,
Right.
or like to have any food sometimes, and you can't go to the gyms or anything, and I'm sure for most people it's really hard to stay motivated to like exercise and whatnot on your own. So yeah,
Yeah,
I totally get that.
yeah, dude. That's part of what my lifestyle has changed too. Is I used to have a personal trainer here at the university. Oh, there goes my eye. I used to have a personal trainer here at the Crest Center, and they would help me work because I was trying to get trying to walk more, and I can walk. I use a walker, um, but but I mean, they closed the gym down because of, oh, that's my chair beeping. Whoops, I left that on. Yeah, that's just my battery dying. Of course, I asked the doctor in the middle of this. Anyway, so yeah, where was I? But I mean, because of the gym closing down, she had to stop. So I'm trying to lift some weights and walk on my own. But so part of it is so when I exercise, I need help. It's hard for me to actually maintain like the amount of time you need to burn calories just on my own without somebody supporting me. So I mean, that's so I've had to kind of give up the dream of being in shape for a little bit, but
Yeah.
so yeah.
And so
Sorry,
you're
my
gonna be
stupid allergy.
um you're finishing up your thesis and whatnot. How do you think that's, and you're gonna get out into the job field, how do you think that's gonna affect your ability to um basically secure a job, especially in the
Um,
history field?
yeah. Well, my mom and I talk about this. She's a guidance counselor at Marquette University High School, and they're hiring so guidance counselors through Zoom and stuff right now because they need. I think she was. I think she's the only one left in her department, so they need people to be guidance counselors. But she thinks because like her school, being a private school, is doing hiring that everyone else is, and there's some tension. It's like, so why aren't you looking for museum jobs right now? And that's because nobody's posting anything because we're in the middle of a global pandemic. I think it's interesting how the museum like industry will be affected. A lot of people are doing more online things. I like a lot of so local museums that I follow. There's one in Sheboygan. They have the curator. They kind of do like a vid blog every day, and they tell you like, so here's how we assess items and things like that. But there are some inside track things that people probably wouldn't get that aren't in the industry that people think are cool, but they're having to becoming a little bit more public facing to keep people interested in kind of talking more about the day-to-day operations of how a museum would work under normal conditions and like how they're changing too, which is interesting because everybody's having to start like a vid blog or something these days. So, but yeah, I'm kind of nervous about um, uh, I guess I don't know when people are going to start hiring again, and there's this expectation from my family that once you graduate or whatever, you go off and get a job. And if you don't kind of do that, you're not doing the right thing. And they don't quite understand that it takes time. So it's always a fun tension in my family. But I'm sure you get some of that in your own way too. But
Yeah.
but anyway.
So if you were to get a job, after this kind of pandemic has settled, would you be willing to do more of that technology based stuff? Like, if people weren't able to get to the museums?
Yeah, I mean, I have. So right before all this started, I was working with Greg Kochen in the archives, and I helped them develop a student manual for interns about like so things that they would post on Facebook to keep audiences interested. I mean, I kind of went through like basically like so basically like so here's how you create a fact of a day kind of thing, or like here is how you post a photograph on social media, things like that. And I think they might like as the time goes on, they might rely on that kind of model a little bit more, that they are kind of just the social media based organization for the time being. You're kind of seeing that with the archiving project that you're doing right now, is too that all goes online, right? Because there is no way to create a museum exhibit out of it right now. I think the original plan was to do something with a museum, right? So
Yeah, so the public history class that I'm in, we were originally working with Irvine Park up in Chippewa Valley, and we were working on exhibits for the new Welcome Center that had been built. And so we were going to try to fill it with artifacts and information about Chippewa Valley and kind of like the greater global history of like the logging industry, because the William Irvine or Irvin, he was a logging baron that kind of became a conservationist, and that's why the park is was saved just because of him, and it's always free. And then COVID hit, and so we couldn't, meet up with the rest of the class and discuss ideas and whatnot, and we couldn't set up the exhibit. So then we kind of switched gears to this rapid response, um, recording people's experiences and like documents and images to basically get a snapshot of what's going on during this time. I think rapid response isn't a new thing. It's they did one for like Ebola.
mhm.
They've done it for like other major diseases that have come out. So, but I think it's kind of a unprecedented thing for like our generation, and it's
Right.
definitely gonna kind of be in the history books. So it's really important to document this at this point.
Yeah. And so I guess just to talk about how this has changed my process. Uh, 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 so when I'm also working with Greg on this exhibit that was supposed to be about how the university dealt with the impact of the ADA. So when that was passed in 1990, that was supposed to be a library exhibit, and they were going to use a few cases, but apparently that's all transitioning online now, and he's kind of figuring that out. So it's going to take a different form. So even the research I'm doing for that is changing. And two, to get back to my thesis work, I basically got pushed into writing about 2-3 months earlier than I wanted to, because all the archives closed. So my original plan was to go through 2-3 more newspapers on microfilm and kind of find some more sources over over April and May. But because of the pandemic, all the archives shut down, so I can't get to those sources. So now I'm kind of being pushed right with what I have, which is, in some ways it's good. It's a motivator. I probably would have agonized over what I don't have the entire time. But it kind of feels like I've had to let some things go in terms of my research and just kind of focus on what I have. So it's kind of changed so what I can write and what I can write with, and it's I guess I've had to change my perspective about how deep my research goes a little bit too. So
Yeah, how has it like affected your source accessibility? With archives and closing, but also like trying to get books and stuff from. So UW has a system that allows you to loan books from other universities within the UW system, and that's been pretty much shut down as well because the library is closed. Um,
Hmm.
so you've been have to pretty much access everything online. How is that? That's negatively affected your, thesis work?
Yeah. uh, Um. So there's one book that I mentioned in my historiography that I realized that I didn't get a scanned copy of. Um. So I don't have a copy of it. So if they ask me um to do more with that particular sector or as that particular book in my historiography, I'm not going to be able to comment on it, or I'm going to have to find a copy of it somehow, because all the libraries are closed. Um, so, and for me, luckily, I guess because I have some issues with my eyes, I just have lower vision. Uh, uh, like, I mean, that's not diagnosed or anything, but it's just that. Uh, so basically, using audio books and having the Kindle read out loud to me is a lot easier than trying to read a physical book for me. I retain more that way anyway. So luckily, a lot of the books I used for my comprehensive exams happened to be books that I needed for my thesis anyway. I kind of planned that out using the critical thinking skills of graduate students. Um, and so I got a lot of those books scanned ahead of time. So and a lot of the other ones I own on Kindle. So luckily, I'm in a pretty good spot. There are just a few rare books or two or three that I can't get to that I may not be able to cite or may not be able to read until libraries open back up again. There's one that's in digital form, but the Kindle book is $90, and I don't know if I want to pay $90 for an ebook. Yeah, welcome to academic publishing. That's the only place that ebook costs probably 40% more than the actual book. So,
Yep. Nope. I get that. I had the same issue. I'm writing a historiography, and all the books that I was gonna access, I couldn't get a hold of. So I tried finding them online, and it's like $80, $55, and I'm like, I can't afford that.
when I'm not being recorded, I can talk to you more deeply about what you could do. But because I have some ideas, but I don't want to say things here.
That's fine. Um, I guess we could just kind of end with, how do you think this is going to affect our future? Is there going to be a new normal that comes out?
Yeah, like. I don't think you're going on a thesis track, right? Or are
No,
you?
thank God, no.
Um, yeah, that makes me wonder about like Shane and those other guys that are just or so guys, I mean in the sense of people, um, who are just beginning on this uh journey. Uh, so journey of writing a thesis, and like so normally this would be the time that you would go to an archive and you would look for sources, but if they're not online you can't get to them, so you don't have that experience of going to the archives and actually looking through stuff. So is everyone just going to have to do some kind of digital thesis where they can only use online documents? We don't know. So that's going to change at least probably some of the criteria that people are judged on that way, and um, I think that that maybe a lot of classes that weren't online might be offered online now because they have to come up with the infrastructure. That concerns me a little bit, just because of the neoliberalism of education. They look for ways to cut corners in like administration costs anyway. So if you don't have to pay for a physical building for students to go in, I mean, are there going to be less traditional classes as time goes on? We don't know, but that's kind of one of my fears about it. That this crisis is kind of basically lead to a reduction of the face-to-face kind of model, because like everybody's learning how to do it. So I guess that's kind of one of my anxieties there. But
Yeah, no, that's totally valid. That's been a huge concern. A lot of businesses are allowing workers to go completely online, and I think already professors now in our university have started talking about doing more online classes. So
yeah, I mean, that's one of the upsides as a disabled person, I think, too, is that there's kind of a stigma, like employment for people that are disabled that need accommodations. Some bosses, they tend to fight you on, or some bosses will fight you on making accommodations under the ADA that you need. Um, Luckily, I haven't had the experience, but I've heard of other people that have had those troubles. But so we're seeing with the pandemic that so people can work from home and they can get these online supports, and that's something that's hopeful for the future. If the so disabled people can work from home, and hopefully so people realize that those kind of accommodations are made possible. I was lucky that the one boss that so one of my bosses actually encouraged me to work from home, so I didn't have to come in most days, which was so I mean, but for a lot of disabled people that aren't at the peak of their health, so working from home is important so that they can get employment and the services that they need, and at least I think we're seeing that that's possible through this crisis. So hopefully the consciousness around that changes, I guess.
yeah. I think that is all the questions that I have to ask you. We got through what I wanted to get through, and you sharing your experience and what's going on for you has been really helpful, and I think it'll educate people not only like what you're going through, but as people in the future will see what it was like during this pandemic. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. This has been great. I'll talk to you later. All right, take care though. I think you might have to do it.